Halloween, ladies and gentlemen, is without a doubt a classic horror film. But like with so many horror films, after the first film, the rest of the sequels are generally crap. Halloween 2 is not particularly bad. Halloween 3 is in theory a good movie. It just didn't need to be named Halloween. And honestly, everything after that is generally pretty bloody terrible. You know, then you got Friday the 13th. The first couple of Friday the 13th weren't particularly bad, but then the sequels got steadily worse until they got better with Jason X. Freddy, Nightmare on Elm Street. The first film was pretty good. I think the third film wasn't that particularly terrible, and then the rest were almost completely abhorrent, right up until Wes Craven stepped back onto the scene with Wes Craven's A New Nightmare, and then of course its remake was utter trash as well. Halloween, I think, of all the major horror franchises, actually has some of the worst sequels of the lot. And it got a particularly horrible remake done by Rob Zombie that turned Mike Myers into a sort of sympathetic character. Yeah, the Halloween remakes were particularly terrible. Thankfully, what we have today is Halloween 2018. It's neither a sequel nor a remakequel. Now, what exactly is a remakequel, you may ask? Well, a remakequel is a term that I use for a film that purports to be a sequel, but is more or less a remake of the very first film. The most notable one is, of course, Star Wars: The Force Awakens. So what exactly is Halloween 2018? Well, it is a Godzilla-style sequel. In the Godzilla franchise, the vast majority of Godzilla sequels are direct sequels to the very first film. Actually, I take that lie back. The Millennium series, pretty much every movie in that series is actually going to be a direct sequel to the very first Godzilla film. And with this Halloween sequel, it is a direct sequel to the very first film and completely ignores Halloween 2 through whatever the hell. So, does it work as a sequel? Well, surprisingly enough, it works. It's a much better sequel than, say, Halloween 2 is. This is an absolutely amazing sequel, to say the least, ladies and gentlemen. I was very surprised by its quality. To be honest, it feels a lot like, well, Halloween Aliens. Hell-Aliens. There's not multiple Mike Myers, of course, but Aliens felt like a natural sequel from Alien. The character of Ellen Ripley knew more about what was going on and wasn't constantly surprised. In Halloween 2018, which really is not a very good title, but whatever, gotta put it up higher on the Google searches, you got an older Laurie Strode, still played by Jamie Lee Curtis, who knows what's going on and generally is a fairly cool character, to say the least. Unlike with so many sequels that take place, 40 years into the future, she's actually a major character. Unlike with so many of these continuations where like the old characters kind of like cameo and then are killed off immediately. Star Wars. Jamie Lee Curtis is the main character of the entire film. Now, the movie kind of tries to bait and switch with a couple of new characters, but thankfully they don't last the movie. Let's just put it that way. Halloween is a classic slasher film. Now, I've never been a big fan of slasher films. I didn't even see Halloween, the first one, until 2013. Ironically enough, I enjoyed Jason X the most out of all the slasher films I've actually seen prior to seeing Halloween 1. Why? Because it's science fiction, and it was just so stupid, it was fun. My biggest problem with slasher films is they go in for really lame comedy, and most of the kills are just done more for laughs than anything else, which I never particularly enjoy. I mean, it's so telegraphed with a lot of those films. It's like, in any average Friday the 13th film, it's like, you want these characters to get cut up. Whereas in the original Halloween, the characters were generally quite sympathetic. Now, one of the big issues, with carrying on a franchise like Halloween is the first film was a product of all the elements that made it. You really can't just make another one. There isn't really like a formula. But Halloween 2018 really does feel like a real movie. It feels like a product of a bunch of disparate elements. Not just, let's make horror movie. It's a classic slasher in regards to the fact that you don't see that much gore. The kills are nice and simple. It's not like, and then Mike pushes somebody's face through a mirror and it looks really stupid. It's like he's snapping necks, he's slitting throats and stuff like that. It's actually real. And I think that's the important thing. A lot of slasher movies are just comedy, I guess. It's just, you watch it because you know it's bad, whereas this, is actually a good movie. Mike Myers definitely feels very threatening. He feels like, he doesn't feel like he's some living avatar of death, but he feels like a very, very dangerous person. He's not doing too many things that are supernatural. He could definitely tank more shots than I think a real person could, but But overall, his kills are very visceral. He's a very visceral character, and he looks absolutely amazing. The characters in the film are not... They are generic slasher fare, but they're written a lot better than your traditional slasher fare. Of course, you have Laurie Strode. She is now old. After the events of Halloween 1, she, of course, became a prepper. Not a very good one, but in regards of Halloween, in regards of Hollywood, that's about as good as you're going to get. She had a daughter, and the daughter is, of course, a complete pushover. And the daughter now has a daughter as well, who's like a straight-A student with a bunch of pissant friends that you can't imagine somebody to want to be friends with, but whatever. And the pissant friends aren't that much of pissants, I suppose. And they get lost pretty much, I think, like halfway through the film. The other characters aren't particularly bad. There's a new Loomis, and there's actually a hilarious line where Laurie Strode literally says, "Oh, so you're the new Loomis." And the new Loomis is okay. He, of course, doesn't have the screen presence of Donald Pleasance, but, a lot of these old actors just are never going to be truly replaced by any new ones. But that's okay. He does the best job he can possibly do. I think it's one of the best aspects of the film, though, is that everyone is trying to put in a legitimate amount of effort. And it doesn't feel like your traditional Hollywood crap. It doesn't feel overblown. It doesn't feel overwrought. It feels like, well, a real movie. The character of Laurie Strode is quite excellent. You can definitely see that Mike Myers really damaged her a bit. And of course, Jamie Lee Curtis plays her really, really well. She's the tough grandma character, and I really quite like that. The female characters in this film are not done in a really annoying manner. They're not overly tough, but nor are they overly weak. They're actually legitimate characters versus just walking gender stereotypes. And I mean gender stereotypes not in the patriarchy way, but I'm talking like the way Hollywood likes to write women. They actually feel like legitimate human beings, which I really, really quite like. The male characters aren't useless, and they aren't stupid either. A lot of films love to make the useless man and useful woman kind of archetype, and they don't do that here. The men actually are still legitimate characters. Now, like the boyfriend character for the great-granddaughter of Laurie Strode is kind of a pissant. Well, more than kind of a pissant, but, that's just going to happen because he's supposed to be unsympathetic. That's just what they do in these slasher films. But he does not get slashed, which I was quite surprised at. The basic plot is pretty much somewhat similar to the original Halloween. It's actually handled in a fairly interesting way. Mike is never faced with too overwhelming of odds, and it actually kind of makes sense that he could do a lot of the things that he does. The ending of the film is actually pretty good, but I'm going to go ahead and spoil this right here. You don't see the body. So it's like, I think they're like, man, if this makes like a lot of money, we could have more sequels. As far as I'm concerned, the Halloween franchise ends here, and it ends on a great note, and overall, excellent, excellent film. I highly recommend seeing it. I'm glad I got to see it in the theater, because it is, of course, the 40th anniversary of Halloween 1. And I highly recommend seeing it in the theater if you can, just to say that, hey, I got to see Halloween in the theaters. Now, let's get into the spoilerific territory, ladies and gentlemen. So, the movie starts up with two pissants. That was really loud. Two pissants going to a mental institution where Mike Myers has been held for 40 years. Yes, he did not die at the end of Halloween. Instead, he was simply captured. And they're like, and it's really stupid. I don't see this happening in real life. They go up to Mike and like the lead pissant. He's actually seen in the trailer, I believe. Holds up the Mike Myers mask, the Captain Kirk painted white mask. He was like, "Speak, Michael, speak!" And all the crazies are like, "Ah!" You don't see Mike's face, thankfully. And then it ends, and it's actually it crash cuts to Halloween in the theme, which is really cool. It's really kind of silly that they'd allow these people to do that, but whatever. We gotta have a plot. We gotta have a plot. So then the pissants go see Laurie Strode. We see Laurie Strode's prepper compound. It's not very good. I mean, there's a lot of weak spots and things of that nature. Laurie Strode is, of course, a complete shut-in because of what happened to Mike. Now, they're kind of being stupid. That's why I call them pissants. They are like, Mike Myers was a real human being. Oh, he's the real victim, isn't he? And basically, Laurie tells him to get out. Now, before they could actually meet Laurie, they kind of like were at the gate because she's a prepper. She got a big-ass fence. And they're at the gate, and it's like, we'll give you $3,000. What's really cool is later in the film, Laurie gives the $3K to her granddaughter, which I thought was pretty neat. We then, of course, get introduced to Laurie Strode's granddaughter. She's a fairly decent character. She's out wandering around with her various pissant friends. Pissant friend 1 is like, Laurie Strode, survived all the murders, right? So it's like, it's not that big a deal. He's an SJW, if ever there was one. And in pure SJW fashion, he, of course, commits vandalism by blowing up a pumpkin. Thankfully, Laurie Strode's granddaughter and one of her other pissant... Actually, the other friend, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't a pissant. Basically, is all like, that's a terrible thing to say, you're a horrible human being, and they kind of move on from that. After that, you have your traditional slasher movie fare. Everything starts up, and then eventually Mike escapes. Why does Mike escape from the mental institution? Because they're going to move him to a more maximum security mental institution, and of course, as they're moving him on the prison bus, he ends up escaping. And there's a few incongruous scenes in this film that I think are added more for levity than anything else. There's like this conversation between a father and his son. The son, like, I don't mind going hunting, Dad, but I like to do my dance on Friday. It's like, I don't really have a problem with that, but it's like, it's not that funny. But, they got to pad it for time somehow. It wasn't horrible. And this father and son come across the crashed prison bus, and of course they get out. Of course. Because if they didn't, we wouldn't have a plot now, would we? In real life, if you see a bunch of crazies stumbling around the road or a bus crashed, you know what I'd recommend doing? Unless you... Even if you do conceal carry and have a gun on, I'd still recommend driving a bit up the road a piece, calling the cops, and waiting for backup. You generally don't want to go off half-cocked, but the father character goes out there and is immediately killed by Mike Myers. The kid, calls the cops, but then gets out of the car and leaves the cell phone. What's always kind of funny is a lot of people who think they're more smart, that think that they're smarter than they really are, like, cell phones ruin all the horror movie plots. No, they don't. I mean, come on, people leave their phone places, people forget their phone at places, batteries die, they drop the phone. I mean, come on. Don't give me bullshit where like, oh, the phone would solve it because they'd call the cops. The cops might not get there in time. I mean, phones aren't these magical devices that just solve all problems. I mean, seriously. But, if you think you're smarter than you are, you'd be like, the phone is the greatest ever. And yes, I am doing the masturbatory motion. But anyway, phone masturbation aside, he leaves the phone, goes out there. At least he takes a gun with him. He takes a rifle. And he goes out there looking at stuff. And eventually, Mike, of course, kills him. Now, of course, he doesn't even get a shot off. What ends up happening is, like, he goes on the bus, and New Loomis is like sitting there, he's like, don't shoot, which is precisely why the kid shoots him, which I'm not sure if that's just, a thing that happened or if there's supposed to be an anti-gun message. I'm going to err on the side of positivity and say it was just a thing that happened and it wasn't an anti-gun message. But, of course, after he shoots New Loomis, he gets his neck broke by Mike. Mike escapes and goes to a gas station where the two pissants from earlier in the movie are, like, getting some food, and they both get killed by Mike, although Pissant 1, the male Pissant, actually does smack him over the head with a tire iron, and I thought that was pretty cool. I like it when, Pissants can actually get a few good hits in before they're killed. I believe you see a little bit of that in the trailer, if I'm not mistaken. So Mike is now on a rampage. He's cutting people up, bashing their heads in with hammers. A lot of times you don't actually see it, which I really, really like. I've always liked horror films where it's you hear it, it's implied because your mind can make things worse. And this film does that well. It's not just, oh, he like rips their head off. It's like, you don't see that. I really do like that. Blood is kept to a basic minimum. The suspense is, of course, not as good as the original, but it's still there. There's not that many jump scares. You know, really, the film banks on the menace of Mike. And the music really works quite well. There's an Inception horn, and I like Inception horn. I don't care what anybody says. Towards the end of the movie, where in Mike, it's like, blah! It's like, yeah, chills running up down my spine when that happened. I quite enjoyed that. So, you know, Mike is out there killing people, and once again, one of the characters, the granddaughter, ends up losing her phone. I think also Mike ends up killing the last remaining member of the Loomis family, which is kind of sad, but it's Mike. It's what he does. So once they confirm that Mike's on a rampage, Laurie tries to get all of her family members together, but of course the granddaughter's at a school dance. And, of course, the pissant boyfriend is cheating on her because, of course, that's how it goes. There's a bit of a potential SJW message. They go to the Halloween dance as Bonnie and Clyde, but, of course, the genders are swapped. I'm not sure if that's, you know, just a thing that happened or if that's supposed to be SJW. Once again, I'm going to err on the side of positivity and not say it's SJW. So, the granddaughter's out there, you know, and the pissant boyfriend gets pissed off that she's pissed off that he was cheating on her. And, he takes her phone and throws it in some pudding, which destroys it. Once again, there, you got rid of the phone. See, the phones don't solve all things. What's actually kind of funny, it didn't happen in the same way, but, if I was, stuck in a horror movie, then that would be a perfectly good thing that would show that phones don't necessarily work. When I went to my prom over a decade ago, I had a phone on, and you know what? It fell out of my pocket. So, if a, masked killer is trying to take me down, well, I couldn't really call anyone now, could I? Although, how that story actually ended was quite hilarious. The ROTC, commanding officer found it, and I was able to get it back literally within a week. So, yeah, there's the moral of that story. But, one thing that happens that really kind of took me by surprise is they eventually collect the cops eventually find the granddaughter. And the cops have actually enlisted the aid of New Loomis. He survived getting shot in the chest with a .270 Winchester somehow. I guess it was a close range shot. I guess the kid missed anything vital. If he did die, then it would be kind of a shorter movie. But when they collect the granddaughter, they end up just finding Mike walking around, and they run him over. And then we get a little bit of a twist that it wasn't telegraphed. It was not telegraphed, which is very surprising to say the least. New Loomis actually has gone crazy studying Mike all this time until he stabs one of the cops and loads Mike up in this SUV, the cop SUV, with Laurie Strode's granddaughter and drives over to Laurie Strode's house. Now, at Laurie Strode's house, you've got Laurie Strode herself and her daughter's husband. So Mike gets there. He, of course, breaks out, kills New Loomis by crushing his head. And it was so well done. It wasn't just this massive blah of blood. It just was like a legitimate crush, which worked quite well. Laurie Strode's granddaughter, of course, escapes into the woods, and Mike, he kills the kills the daughter's husband. At least the daughter's husband kind of, well, he didn't really go out that heroically, but at least he picked up a gun before he left the house. Because Mike pulls up in a cop car, and the husband, who's kind of dumb, picks up a revolver and walks out and. He's like, hey, what are you guys doing here? He just keeps walking. Then Mike, of course, comes up behind him and snaps his neck. The final confrontation between Laurie Strode and Mike Myers is actually quite good. It's very suspenseful. Laurie gives as good as she got, and there is a callback to Halloween 1. During the course of the fight, Mike knocks her off the roof and she falls onto the ground. He looks away, then looks back down, and she's gone. Just like Halloween 1. Ultimately, Mike gets shot in the chest with a .270 Winchester, or it might have been a 30-06. I'm not entirely sure. He doesn't die initially, but then he gets shot and stabbed a whole bunch by Laurie Strode. And then finally, he's locked in this basement area, and the house is set on fire. The end. We don't see a body, so it's maybe we'll have Halloween X3, right? From start to finish, the film was Very, very, very enjoyable. I won't say entertaining because that would be kind of selling it short. It is a legitimately good movie. It feels a lot like Aliens does when compared to Alien 1. You know, that's really kind of how that feels. It feels like this is the sequel we've long since been waiting for. And it works so well. Now, the only nitpicks I really have are the guns and the lack of prepper intelligence, but those are the smallest ones, which is why we're going to talk about them for just a moment. Okay, so there's a scene when Mike first starts trying to bust into Laurie Strode's house. Now, Laurie Strode, she's got like all these locks and everything. That's why there's two glass windows right next to the door. Guess what Mike does? Smash! And starts choking her, and it's like, Laurie, you might have built a door without two obvious means of egress, but whatever. Her gun choice is pretty bad, but remember, she doesn't live in Texas. She lives in Illinois, and let's just say their gun laws could be a little more constitutional, but whatever. That being said, she does have some good... Well, I was going to say she does have some good gun choice, but she really doesn't. She uses a 44-40 chambered Winchester 1870 something. I forget what it is. It's a case hardened Winchester long rifle, and you know I don't really know why she would get a Uberti reproduction of a Winchester when she could get like any number of guns that would be way better. And 44-40 is very weak, but whatever. She's got like. She like pulls out like a pistol grip only shotgun, and I said this in the theater. I was like, you know, it would be a little bit better if you put a stock on that. And she's like, this is for tactics. It's like, sure it is, Laurie, sure it is. Looks like somebody didn't take any courses at Gunsight. And you know, she does. I don't think she ever she does get to use the shotgun. Blows off some of Mike's fingers. And she likes revolvers. And literally perpetuates the stupid myth of revolvers don't jam. Well, you know what? Modern-day semi-automatic pistols, especially modern-day striker-fired polymer frame pistols, they don't jam either. Just saying, Laurie, maybe you ought to have, you know, I don't know. I was thinking about that myself. 10mm Glock, just because you can carry a shitload of ammo with that. And her rifle really needed to be a 300 black AR, either with a tailhook brace or just SBR that bitch. Like, have a 10.5 inch barrel. Boom. Mike Myers ain't getting up from that. Just saying. And you know what? I know she's living in Illinois. You know, they don't believe in the Second Amendment for whatever reason. So if that's the case, 12-gauge shotgun, 3-inch magnums. I think Mike, he's going to be missing a few body parts if you shoot him with that. And, well, she does. You should have just shot him more. You know, it's... Once again, so many. It's a tiniest of nits. Like, if she did have better guns, then it wouldn't be as dramatic. If she was a better prepper, it wouldn't be as dramatic. So, it works quite well. It's a very, very, very nice film all around. And I really like the Inception horn on Mike, though. It's like, blah, it's like, and you feel it. You feel the menace of the Michael Myers. I guess I'll also address the little bit of controversy that came about. Now, obviously, I'm a pro-Second Amendment person, you know. As of this recording, I'm preparing to go do a 3-gun competition. But, you know, I'm not one of those people that has to basically be almost like a gun SJW in some instances. There was a complaint about Jamie Lee Curtis, about her being anti-gun and yet using guns in the film. I hate to break it to you, but movies aren't real. You know, maybe they exist in some other universe somewhere, but if they do, it doesn't really matter because it's Laurie Strode, not Jamie Lee Curtis. So who cares? And Jamie Lee Curtis is anti-gun, but who cares? I mean, the thing is, let's be reasonable. Jamie Lee Curtis is from a completely different culture than most of the country. She is, of course, a Hollywood person, grew up in Hollywood with actor and actress parents. So it makes sense she's going to be anti-gun, because she's probably never been in danger at any time in her life. So it's like, well, why don't you just have bodyguards? They don't cost that much. So, you know what? I don't care what Laurie Strode's politics... Laurie Strode? I don't care what Jamie Lee Curtis's politics are. They do not interest me in the slightest. It's the same way with any other Hollywood actor, you know, like Chris Evans or Chris Hemsworth or any of those Marvel actors. We all know what their politics are, and who cares? You separate the art from the artist. That's what you gotta do. The way I see it, Laurie Strode is a character. Yeah, she's a character in a movie. So if you want to have like the multiverse theory, but you know what? There's another universe out there where Laurie Strode probably is a pro Second Amendment person. So be happy about that. So, ladies and gentlemen, Halloween 2018. It is, in my opinion at least, the best Halloween sequel. It is Hallaliens. And so, I am Generallotz, wishing you good, Jason X, and good, Wes Craven's The New Nightmare, whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed my review of Halloween 2018, please consider subscribing, and if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon so that I can continue bringing you these film reviews.